Only on a good day. Awakening. She was in a semi-fetus. He was snuggled in behind. He had no definite memory of the fight, but a bad aftertaste took the form of a slight resentment towards the pretty young girl who lay beside him. With some notion of chivalry, or a fleeting remorse at the lack of such stuff from his life, Manus thought not to touch her, just leave her undisturbed. But the feeling was brief, and soon replaced by lust, or at least an almost obligatory gesture of lust. He pulled the blanket up to take a look. Suspender belt, fishnets, even the red bra he knew had slits in the teats, supposedly for easy access to the nipples. He pulled her rump round. He pulled her rump back and up. She wiggled it a little in pleasurable expectation. He wet his fingers with his saliva, lubricated her a little, parted her cheeks, and slid his dick in. She groaned a little to let him know how much she appreciated it. He felt tense, withdrew his penis after a few strokes, and ejaculated his hot sperm on her cheeks, on her suspender belt. It was only then, after he had ejaculated, that she turned her head around to face him. She had a black eye. He had hit her. They had both been drunk. She wouldn't shut up and she wouldn't take her face out of his, and he had hit her. It looked horrible. He let her lie there frustrated, wouldn't touch her, couldn't get a hard on. She cursed him as a useless lover. He did not deny it. He left Jean lying on his dirty mattress in the bare floorboards and plaster room. He went into the bathroom, had a shit, stuffed his piles back up his ass, washed his hands and went downstairs. The house was a shell of a building, which provided shelter for Manus and Nick and James, who were three otherwise homeless nobodies. Downstairs, Manus had to light a fire to boil a kettle. Jean came down shortly after. He passed her a cup of tea. "You're a jerk," she sneered. "Only on a good day," he smirked. At first he didn't want to play, but she persisted until he got drawn in. Reacted to her words with anger, and she loved it once it was started. She yelled at him, he yelled back. She picked up a stick, he picked up a bigger one. He smashed his stick against the naked concrete floor. They both heard the stick crack. He liked the sound of it, and smashed it against the floor until it was in pieces. She was yelling, "You big dickhead, you big macho dickhead! Get out," he was yelling back. "Just get out." She stood up, smashed her cup of tea, and walked out. Manus sat there, drank his own cup of tea and tried to collect himself. James came down the stairs and Manus made a joke of the splintered stick. Bit of kindling. After breakfast, Manus went out to his daily business. He was a hash man. Bought and sold hash, only small time, no high flyer. Metaphorically speaking, he flew under the radars. A friend laid 4 ounces on. It was ordinary Moroccan, but a good pressing, light and fluffy, with a soft toffee texture. He crossed over the railway by the stone bridge, with the 4 ounces wrapped up in a brown paper bag sticking out of his shirt pocket. He skirted the school's playing fields and breathed deeply as he walked down the steep sloped cobbled back entry. The neighbours were out at the bottom of the entry. They did not like Manus because he was a dirty squatter. Manus smiled at his neighbours. He knew he was being very unwise to go to the squat with 4 ounces of draw on him. The police often came round, claiming that since it was only a squat, they didn't need a search warrant. And the drug squad section of the police wished to talk with Manus, but so far he had never been in when they had called. Good luck couldn't last forever. Manus stopped at the step on the back door and through the kitchen door spotted 2 healthy big bastard type guys wearing shirts and ties standing in the living room. Manus turned and ran. It was a sunny day, and he smiled once again as he ran back up past his neighbours. Light on his feet, he ran fast back up that steep slope cobbled back entry. almost laughing. Only once did he look over his shoulder to see if there was a chase on. But the little their eyes had seen had hardly registered in their brains before he turned and ran. Over waste ground he ran, through a wire fence and across the railway tracks to stash his hash in the roots of a tree. He wasn't exactly sure what to do then. He was clean, couldn't get busted. He wanted a cigarette. Wasn't sure if he should go to the squat or not. He went to the squat. One of the beefeaters sat in a chair, the other stood. Manus sat in the bed beside James. The two beefeaters were CID, just having a nosy. James was drinking cider and smoking cigarette butts. Manus refused the cider and asked if there was any clean tobacco. There wasn't. CID said there had been copper and lead pipes stolen from the empty houses beside the squat. Manus raised his two arms to show that he had no copper or lead pipes. Well, we didn't expect you to say anything else, said CID. Well, I'm away on then, said Manus, pleased to take the opportunity of leaving the two policemen, who seemed at a loss as to how to stop him. Manus crossed the main road and arrived breathlessly at his friend Bridget's house. He scrounged a fag and kept laughing at how close he had just been. The squat was at the bottom of the valley, and Bridget's house was up the hill, so Manus was able to watch safely from her front door until the two cops left. Then, figuring the coast was clear, he walked back down the hill to the main road. The coast wasn't clear. He hadn't given them enough time to drive off, and when they spotted him, the car stopped and one jumped out and ran across the road towards Manus while the other turned the car around. Manus made a joke of spread eagling against the factory wall. For some reason, this unearthed CID. Manus spread eagled against the factory on the main road in a poxy little town in the north of England. Manus turned away from the wall as the policeman managed to get across the road. All right, man, how can I help you? Manus offered. His helpfulness seemed to make it even more difficult for the policeman. It showed in his face, and he had to stall a bit to regain his composure before coming up with his few questions. Name, date of birth, place of birth, present address. The policeman spotted a small barbiturate burn on Manus's arm. What's this? Manus couldn't believe it. The burn was 15 years old. He had perhaps a half a dozen such marks. As a teenager, Manus had shot up everything he could get his hands on. His friends had said that they could save him money by just hitting him on the head with a lump of wood and knocking him unconscious, because that was the only state of mind he liked, unconsciousness. And barbs had been great for that. Except usually there was so much chalk in the capsules, and the chalk would get stuck in the vein. Sometimes there was an abscess, which would have to be lanced. And then 15 years later, on a sunny day in Lancashire, as a policeman asked a few questions, he could see what looked like a cigarette burn on his arm. Except it wasn't a cigarette burn. It was a barb burn. That's years old. Don't be pulling me for that. Have you got anything on you now? I don't even have a fag. The policeman considered Manus guilty of an unspecified crime, but could do little other than look at the ground, shake his head, and after a little consideration let him go. Have fun, said Manus. Manus stopped the next passer-by and asked for a cigarette. It was actually someone he knew, who gave him a cigarette and asked if Manus could help him get a blim. Manus could help him. The police watched from their car and then drove off. Back at the squat, Jean was there again, and some others looking for blims. James was well stuck into his cider. James's reaction to the police was a delayed one. While they were there, he had a cocky acceptance, but once they left, his resentment of their power would come out in ugly words and violent gestures. Manus laughed over at Jean. Back for another round. Laughed at James nursing his precious bottle of cider. With the adrenaline still pumping around his body, Manus laughed. He went out, got his wares from underneath the tree roots, brought them back to the squat, barricaded the door, and split the quarter into 4 singles. Later, He took himself back out across the railway just to sit this time. He smoked a cigarette. The sun was still shining. That evening, they sat round the fire in the squat. James, Nick, and Manus. They had two visitors, Denise and Dave. Denise was singing, Dave was playing guitar. Then Jean appeared and tried to join in, but somehow she ended up in competition. Her voice was loudest. She wanted to get across the depth of her emotion. She persistently dominated to a ridiculous degree, and Manus couldn't cope. Jean hadn't been there, he might have stayed in, but she was, and he wanted to go out. He slipped out the back door with Nick. They hailed a taxi on the main road, and the town was theirs. A poxy little town. Dirty, grey, grim, redundant mill town. Most everybody in it in the doldrums. In the jarrow gloom, hung overhead like a thick cloud, even on a good day. Our two gallants made it to the town's only nightclub. It was coming on a full moon. Every bit of liquid on the planet was feeling the pull from its nearest neighbour. Nick introduced them to two girls. They were pretty, but plain. Nick was going to make a play for one. Manus was bored. He found himself a spot at the back of the dance hall and watched the show. Flesh, fishnet stockings, fancy clothes. But it was the flesh. Flesh on show. Like the butchers, the abattoir, the slaughterhouse, where you came for your fresh meat. Manus was about to leave when he saw a sexy thing in a black mini make a sexual joke of lunging across the floor at him. It was just a joke, but Manus liked it. Made the same joke of rising out of his chair to run across the floor and fuck with her on the spot. Mary was an old friend. They'd done something before, and it was about time for another go. So here they were. She had just split up with her boyfriend. She was on the hunt. She sat on his lap. His hand gripped her buttock, checking out how far he could go. His hand hinted at slipping up the slit. She didn't flex a muscle, but she used methadone, and he didn't want her. He knew he could never really reach through and touch her when she used that stuff. Anyway, when he slipped his hand up her slit, her pussy held little attraction. He looked around at all the young girls who didn't use methadone, and he wanted fresh meat. He didn't know which piece he wanted. Did he really want them all? Perhaps he just wanted Jean. Jean appeared, scowling, sneering, looking for trouble. Manus went to the bar and got her a drink, but when he returned, Mary explained that Jean had stormed off. Manus was sick of her storms. He made a play for another one, or another one made a play for him. Claire's legs weren't that sexy, and her figure was more dumpy than curvy. She was dressed colourful and tatty, ragamuffin style. She asked him what he'd been eating garlic with. He blew his breath in the opposite direction and admitted that he stunk, but she said she liked the smell. He gave her a Plymouth draw and she bought him a drink. The next time she went to the bar, he went as well. She refused to drink, he offered. She had taken whiz that night, and Manus did a little charade on the effects of whiz. First night smiling. Second night still smiling, but the face is taunter. Third night the smile is gone and the whole body is taunt. Fourth night reaching for the ceiling. Fifth night reaching to plug yourself into the electric light bulb. He was quite a showman. She had never taken speed that far. She was young. They were pleased to meet each other. Genuinely and simply. No strings attached or demands made. Just as they were about to walk back to their tables, they both became aware of Jean, staring across the bar. She was playing the beaten, jilted, cheated lover. She was good, if a little over dramatic. Claire went back to her table. Manus offered Jean a drink, which she refused, so he went back to his table and left her at the bar. Manus and Nick danced with Mary, and Manus wondered if it was going to be twos up. Manus owed Nick one, but Mary didn't want Nick, and Manus had his eye on Claire. Mary kissed Manus goodnight and told him she loved him. Then Mary left, and Manus's eyes stuck with Claire. They wouldn't even have to do it on the first night. They could talk. She looked like she could have read a book. Maybe Claire and Manus could make it. Have children, then grandchildren, and remember that first night. When it was coming on a full moon, and she was full of whiz, and he was taking the town, and chance would be a fine thing. Jean came over and handed him out and followed him home. She got into his bed. He went to bed in the early hours. She wasn't wearing any of her sexy gear. No fishnets, no suspenders or bras with slits in the teats. Just a naked girl. She was in a semi-fetus and he pulled her rump round and juiced her up. He parted her cheeks and slid in easy. He pounded it for hours. She pounded it back. Her vagina muscles squeezed his prick tight. His prick stood hard. They both moaned and groaned a bit. She came. He didn't. He didn't want kids.